Okay, wonderful. Hello, everybody who is online or in person. For our people online, we're still having issues with our in-house camera, so you get to see me from my laptop camera right here. Hello. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to IGDA Twin Cities, our game dev meeting. We've got a slightly new set of slides. Thank you, board members, and especially Mark for doing the graphic design. We'll go through our order of operations, talk through our community plugs, and then jump into our main event, Jose Estrada, within talk on VFX in Unreal Engine. Woo! Yeah. Oh, here we are. Welcome in. If you're a first-time attendee, let's tell you about what we do here. IGDA TC events aim to provide a safe and inclusive environment for everyone who makes games or is interested in game development. Whether this is your first event or you've lost count, and no matter if you're in person or watching online, we are thrilled to have you here. If you're interested in our safe event policy, it can be found on our website, igdatc.org/policies. Fun fact, we're all volunteer. This is all from our spare time that we are so graciously, enthusiastically giving to help support our community and put on events that hopefully successfully brings people together. That's our goal. That's our vision. If you've got questions, concerns, or problems, anything related to the community that you are unsure about or you have opinions about that you would like to be heard by the management, reach out to igdatwincities@gmail.com. You can also find our board members on our IGDATC Discord by name or via the role at IGDATC board. We have a little light blue tag for it, so it's all color-coded, so you can see which ones are who. If you're interested in serving on our board, our next election is coming up in March 2025. So get your campaign speeches ready, gang. We also have a wonderful, equally amazing team of volunteers, because just our board can't do it alone. If you're interested in helping us run the organization, or if you have ideas of how we could grow, improve, or better serve our community, reach out to a board member in person or on Discord and let us know you're interested. Above are just a couple of our many wonderful volunteers. These ones very much supporting us throughout 2024. If you see yourself up here, thank you. And if you don't see yourself up here, but you're a volunteer, send us a picture, please. So, if you're new here, we've got plenty of regular events, which mostly take place on Wednesdays from 6:30 to 9:30 Central Time. We've got our first Wednesday of the month is our Devs Play Games, which is a social board gaming meetup, open to people bringing in board games as well to playtest, as well as just getting to socialize with other game developers. Our second Wednesday of the month, if you're here, you made it, good job, is our Game Dev meeting, where we have industry and community presentations, as well as opportunities for networking, socializing, and just generally catching up with other devs. Our third Wednesday of the month is our Twin Cities playtest. That's next Wednesday, where developers can bring copies of their games, either online or in person, to play and show their in-development games. And attendees are able to playtest them and speak with the developers and give actual feedback. And then finally, our fourth Wednesday of the month is our MN, VR, and HCI meetup at REM 5, which is a VR, AR, and HCI series of presentations and demos. So if you're interested in VR, AR, human-computer interaction, any of that sort of stuff, that's your jam. These all have generally different venues. Our Devs Play Games and our Game Dev meeting are here at Nerdy. You made it. Good job. And our Twin Cities playtest is at Noble Robot. And then finally, our MNVR and HCI, as said earlier, is at REM 5. We also have special interest events, which are generally on Saturdays. We've got our Women in Games gathering. If you are women or women adjacent, if you identify with that label, you're welcome to join us every third Saturday from 6:30 to 8:30 at Noble Robot. This is just a general no-agenda networking and social event. And then our People of Color event get-together is generally on Saturdays, but we currently have it on hiatus. Keep tabs on this. We're hoping to bring it back soon. For more info on all of these events, if this doesn't somehow miraculously stick perfectly in your brain, we have all this listed in the hashtag events info channel on the Discord server. And if you're interested in starting up a new event or running something of your own, reach out to one of us. Let us know. Voice your opinions. We'd love to hear them. Now, Mark, would you like to come up and talk about the Twin Cities playtest, which is next week? If you got games, any games, tune in.
All right, fine. I'm going to start bothering people more at the Gamedev event, Gamedev meeting about next week's Twin Cities playtest, because it's next week, y'all. If you have a game you're working on, please send it my way. The instructions are in the on the Discord, but a little bit here. If you have a PC or mobile game, you send me a build. We get it running on the machines at the space. That goes up on the stream, which means it gets recorded, including the feedback from playtesters. You actually see them on camera as well. For tabletop and VR games, which we haven't done, but we want to make it open, you bring in your own equipment, or for tabletop, your own meeples. And let me know details about the game. We'll find a space for you. If all of that is too much and it's like Tuesday afternoon and you're like, you know what, I think I do have something to bring, you don't even have to tell me. You can just show up with it on a laptop or with your stuff. We can't guarantee you a space, but there's people there to play your game, so just come on in, no need to sign up. But if you do, you get those extra benefits. That's kind of the whole deal, but, oh, Dale has a question? If you don't have a game, then you come and play other people's games, and you give them feedback, and then their game is better, and then you get a little mention in their credits probably. And then you can bug them about that. Sam's going to host next week, so come for Sam. Normally it's Dale. Trenton has a question. I can't help you there. Too fun? Then, like, I don't know, write it down in a notebook or something. I don't know what to tell you. We're agnostic as to the quality and enjoyability of games. We're just there to host them. But interestingly, they've all been a blast, I think. 100%. Not lying. All right. Here's the microphone.
Thank you so much. Echoing that again, if you have games that are in development, in progress, anything worth showing, which is a loose definition, everything is worth showing, show up next week, pretty please, with a cherry on top. And if you're interested in connecting with our community more, we've got a lot of Discord channels that you should know about. We've got a games and projects section of our server where you can share a project you're working on if you're local, and it's managed by you, the developer. If you're interested in getting one of these channels, just send a message into our Request a Channel channel. And we also have an events section where you can chit-chat about each of our events. If there is something that someone you wanted to reach out to, but you forgot to follow up, you can send a message in the chat or just continuing the conversation afterwards for any interesting stuff you had to say. We also have discipline-specific channels, so you can get in the weeds, discuss other topics with other developers. We've got open room for adding any extra channels. We have an extra section for that. So if you're interested in talking about something that you don't feel like has been given its own weight in our discipline-specific channels, let us know. We're always trying to improve our Discord. And there are ways you can support IGDATC beyond just being a community member if you're interested. You can look and be cool in one easy step. We've got merch. We've got high-quality t-shirts and more. Plenty of logo, color, and style combinations can be found at igdatc.merch, or igdatc.org/merch. We have bags as well, as you can tell from our wonderful image. You can also, if you're interested, donate your game's art. If you want t-shirts for your game or project, and if you're interested in supporting IGDATC, feel free to send us your logos and graphics, and your merch will be listed along IGDATC's. All of these revenues will go towards your community. So if you're interested in donating, but you also want to promote your game, this could be like a perfect combination of that. And now let's give a quick shout out to our wonderful sponsors. We do. This room that we're all in, Nerdery, is a sponsor in that they provide us a venue. They allow us to host these events here for free, and I'd like to also give a huge shout out to Troy over there for keeping things running day in and day out. All of these meetings, thank you so much. Truly a cornerstone of the community. They host our Devs Play Games and our Gamedev meeting. Nerdery itself is a digital consulting and software development services. Their message, I don't know what this motto here is. It's just like a tagline. Curiosity, creativity, commitment to delivering breakthroughs for clients. Okay, I won't read them off. We also have Noble Robot as our venue sponsor for our Twin Cities playtest, Women in Games, and our POC get-together. Noble Robot is a developer and artist-friendly co-working space in Minneapolis. And we have REM5, which is a venue sponsor for our MN, VR, and HCI meeting every month. REM5 is a full-service immersive experience agency. So, in general, thank you so much to our wonderful event venue sponsors. We've also got another special sponsor for tonight, Quantum Fiber. If you guys would like to come up, they provided us with the wonderful pizza, salads, and cookies, as well as beverages, I believe. Woo! Thank you for bringing pizza back after the pandemic.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you for letting us attend tonight, bringing you the pizza, food, and we have some wonderful swag that only a few of you grabbed, so be sure to get some of that. Quantum Fiber is, we're trying to reach out to the gamers community. I know that, speed is an important part of it. I am not going to be the most technical person, but, we are trying to reach out to the gaming community with our multi-gig speeds to the home. We also serve the Minneapolis area with small businesses as well. So all you got to do is go to q.com. Prices will vary by zip code, but plug in your address, see if we're available in your neighborhood, and it will have a menu of all the options for you. So thanks for letting us attend, and seems like a lively crowd.
Thank you so much. Woo! And help make their journey back home easier by grabbing some of those bags and other swag. Alrighty. As well as our general IGDA Twin Cities announcements. That'll be it. And then we've got community plugs. If you're interested in plugging something for the community, if you've got a game release, development news, event or meetup, something cool you've seen, something new you're working on, if you're looking for help, if you're looking for work, or anything else, step right up and take a little bit to talk about your thing.
All right, thank you. So, how many of you have attended GDC? How many of you want to attend GDC but can't afford it? So if that's you, there's going to be a game developers conference in November in Madison, Wisconsin called MDev, and this is basically GDC but in the Midwest. And it is significantly cheaper than going to GDC, and it's a lot closer. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check them out. I actually don't know because I am not affiliated with MDev and I've never actually looked it up. But I'm sure Midwest maybe. We'll go with that.
Yes. And we had a question from Scott over here. Show of hands who's been to MDev before. It's pretty solid. Yeah, one would assume. All right, and I believe we have another plug if you're interested in. Yeah, no worries.
Hi. All right, I'm Ryan, and today my coworker told me his son has a game on Steam and asked me to go wishlist it. So I'm going to ask you guys to do the same because it'll kind of make me look like a cool guy. Primordialis. Yep, it's good luck finding it. I think, thank you for posting it in the Discord for me because I didn't do it. But it is posted in the Discord, and if you could give him a wish list, I guess that's how you get onto Steam now. I don't know. Is that, can anybody confirm that? Yeah, does more wish lists get you? Just, is that basically what he's asking for, is just to see how much interest he gets or something? I don't know. All right. Anyway, if you could, it'd be cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, check it out, guys. All right. Who's to say, really? Nobody saw. Just ran in with the mic and left. That'd be crazy. Anybody else? We'll go once, twice, thrice. If not, oh, apologies. Oh, we've got, yes, one more. Come on up. Feel free.
Hi, how many of you have recently released a game and then felt extreme disappointment at releasing the game? Believe me, it's not actually as uncommon as it sounds. A couple of months ago, I don't remember the man's name, unfortunately, but a few of us were talking around an Applebee's table late at night and kind of thinking about creating an event where you can go ahead and every year come together to celebrate all of the new games that were released in the Midwest by indie studios, real studios, kind of just whatever. I'm kind of looking to gauge, see how much desire there is for something like that. I'm going to be putting together some statistics and things like that for the volunteer channel in a little bit here. But I kind of want to see from a perspective of who would attend one of these, even if they didn't have a game that they released. Like, does that sound like something that's interesting to see an event where you get to see all the new stuff that's kind of come out, see kind of the different people come up and get, like recognized for creating a game? Probably like the nerdery, like one of these meetings, we'd have an hour or two of socialization before. There'd be some catering is my hope. I don't know budget because I don't know how much money I'll have to pay for this. And then we'll have kind of an auditorium area where people can shuffle in, and we'll just kind of shuffle through all the different people who created a game in random order, I guess. We could do it alphabetically. We could do it by release date. I haven't decided. Correct. Yeah, they get right. You'd be walking up, talking about it for about 5 to 10 minutes, kind of like what the Stout students do, just on a much less technical scale and kind of more of like our own version of an award show, just to kind of get people excited with the fact that, yeah, you released a game. You actually did it. Congratulations. So, show of hands if that is something that you would be interested in attending. Phenomenal. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alrighty. We'll do one last final call. Yeah. Plug to share. You got a blog post? Yeah, if you send it to the Discord chat for this meeting, we can pull it up on the screen for you to point at while we're talking. If you go to the Discord, it will be the, yeah, there you go. Gamedev meeting channel. Alrighty. Let me also check and make sure. Perfect. Let me see.
Oh, did I not? I don't have like service.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. You can also talk through it, and then we can link to it, if that works.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, I wrote a blog post about building some art. Oh yeah, I'm Carlo. I kind of make games. I mostly do gaming hardware. So I wrote a blog post about the past 2 years of building arcade machines and presenting them at conventions around here. So I was gonna link that, and just if you guys want to take a look or reach out to me if you have any ideas for gaming hardware or want to know where to get started.
Thank you. And we'll send a link to the chat. Alrighty. Final call for, oh, did we get it? Oh, okay, never mind. Final call for any plugs. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Alrighty, we have one with a slide. Welcome back, Mark.
We're still in the plug section. Don't confuse me with the board member who came up earlier. This is Nice Games Club. This is the Gamedev podcast I've hosted for years and years and years. I do occasionally talk about it here at the events, but I think I'm going to start talking about it every month. But we do roundtable topics, we do interviews, and you can see our recent episodes up there. We did a great accessibility interview. We talked a lot about this really fascinating concept from an adjacent industry called theming versus aesthetics. So we sort of a different way of describing it than I think game development usually does. And for the last couple weeks, we've been like on a tear about like board game instructions. So there's like a 3 in a row where we talk a lot about that. So that's what's going on right now on the show. But I will also say, because this is the first time I put this slide in here, my privilege as a board member, but it's not my privilege. If you want something you want to talk about every month here, we can put something in here for you to come up and talk about and remind people about every month. Get in touch with the board, because this is not a privilege that's just associated with the folks who make the slideshow. That's not fair. Okay, any questions about the show or anything like that, just find me later. Right?
Awesome. Thank you so much. The benefit of having a slide in here as well is that if you can't make it to a meeting, then you can still have your thing plugged. We'll just look around and see if you're here, pause for an awkward 5 seconds, and then if not, then we'll read off your slide for you. So seriously, take us up on that. All right, intermission. Everybody, deep breath in, deep breath out. Alrighty, and we will now get started, passing the mic over to our speaker of the night, Jose Estrada.
Hey everyone. Eat the mic. Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Jose Estrada. I'm a VFX artist in the games industry. Right now I'm currently working for Riot Games as a VFX artist on the fighting game 2XKO. I studied in University of Wisconsin Stout 3.5 years ago, and graduated from there with Sam. So that's how I got the connection to come here and present. And today I'll be first showing you slides of like a breakdown of the different parts of VFX. And then I'll kind of be doing an improv, like asking everyone, kind of making VFX up on the go. So just so everyone can see kind of the general process and not just slides. So yeah. Is my screen? Oh, it is up there. Okay, cool. And feel free to like stop me anytime. If you have questions. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm Jose Estrada, VFX artist in the games industry, Riot Games, TXKO, in case anybody didn't hear that. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is my portfolio really quick. I worked on League of Legends before I joined 2XKO. So I've worked on there for about a year, 2 years, and then I recently joined 2XKO, and I worked on the character Darius here, and then I'm not going to show too much because I just want to do the presentation. And I also worked recently on the character Braum, which was shown at Vegas last summer. Or this summer. Are we still in summer? I think we're still in summer. I don't know. I think it's spring. Wait. Anyways, so I'm just going to go real quick. I can show more of my portfolio at the end if we have time. So quick intro to games and VFX in games. VFX in games is somewhat similar but pretty different from VFX in film because we have to make everything work in real time, and that means that we have to set up a lot of moving parts to be able to work with code and a lot of data. And on top of that, you have to be able to draw. I specifically, well, depends on the type of VFX artist you are, because some VFX artists specialize in more realistic stuff made from simulations, and other VFX artists are more specialized in stylized art, like I am. So most of the VFX you'll be showing here are mainly stylized. So I like to break down VFX in games into 4 different parts, 4 kind of skill sets you need to like learn. First is you need to know how to make very simple 3D models. You do not need to have very advanced 3D modeling skills. Most of the time you're making like a cylinder and squishing it, or making a sphere. You just need to have very basic level knowledge of 3D modeling, and if you have that, that's pretty much enough to make VFX. Where most of the skill and the time is spent is usually in the game engine and drawing your textures. And then shaders are kind of a prerequisite to making your VFX even show on the screen. So I'll be breaking down and explaining what each of these are. But yeah, these are the 4 big parts: 3D models, materials/shaders, textures, and particle systems. So I like to think of the 3D model as like the canvas. You need to paint on something physical to show it in a 3D space. So typically we make these shapes, and then we just apply a texture to them. Most of the time we have these things called UVs. Let me see if I show slides. We have these things called UVs, which is how we like lay out the surface so we can draw on it. Imagine you're unwrapping one of those like chocolate like gnomes or chocolate food. The wrapping, if you were to draw on it and then put the wrapping perfectly back in place, it would kind of look like you drew on the gnome. So that's kind of what UVs are. They're just like a 2D representation of the 3D surface, and we draw on those to kind of get an image we want. It's a lot of back and forth, and sometimes it can be tricky. And typically that's also how it works for regular 3D modeling, but we don't go too deep into complicated models. Here's an example on the left how our textures usually look. We don't actually like animate every frame of everything. We usually make like 1 or 2, well I do now, but on the left, these are typically the types of textures you have to make and to get most of what you need. What we do is instead of animating everything by hand every frame, we composite images together and add effects to them, like we control how they blend, what colors they are, and then just color theory, timing, space, and scaling, just art fundamentals combined on top of these 3D models, and you kind of get a look. So here on the right, you can see this is like how a sword swipe might look like in a game engine. As you can see, this is the 3D model, and then this is the texture sideways, right? And then when we display that on this, it kind of looks like a sword swipe you would see in a video game. This is one of the type of assets I can make. I make these all day at work because I work on a fighting game. So if you guys want me to make something similar, I can show you somewhat later. So we make the models, we make the textures, and then we need the shaders. I don't have an correct image of a shader here. But basically, shaders are code, but they're not complex code with syntax. Most of the time, VFX artists nowadays use something called a shader graph. Let me see if I can find an image. This really tiny image here, we use like node-based programming most of the time nowadays for programming shaders, and these define, we basically feed it textures, and then it shoots out an image based off the rules we set in the shader. Most of the time, the shader code is just like multiplication and addition. It never gets too complicated at all. And you don't really need to think of it like math either. Most of the time, I think of it like Photoshop. In Photoshop, you have something called a multiply blend mode. If you layer if you multiply things together, they kind of like blend together the values. When you add things together, they kind of like all get whiter. Instead of thinking of it like actual math, most of the time VFX artists are just thinking about how is this going to get the look I want. And then at a higher level, sometimes we do have to think about the math. But most of the time we just do it. We just have a shader because we need it to display our VFX in the engine. And then the shader gets fed into a particle system. And you might be thinking like, most of the time when you think of a particle system, you think of like the fuzzy white clouds that default Unity Shuriken shoots, or an Unreal, like the confetti is the default ones. But particles can be a lot more complicated and a lot more time-consuming to make too. They can have really complicated meshes with 2D animations on top of them. They can be layered. They can be several layered images. And what we do is that we have something called the particle system, which essentially is a timeline. Each particle that you spawn here, that you see spawning here, has a lifetime, and it lives only for that long. And then from the start of its life to the end of its life, we can define what it does. So we can say at the start of its life, be 3 times as big, and then at the end of its life, be 0. So shrink down to nothing. So that's kind of like the dust that you see Mario when he jumps. It's just like a big poof, and then it just scales down, right? Particle systems are essentially just drive data, and you can think of it like the animation curves you would see in Maya or in animation software. This is the closest thing we have to an actual animation software for VFX. And I'll be showing that later. But the TLDR of particle systems is that they get very complicated. They can be very flexible sometimes, but they can also, and most of the time they're just driving data at the end of the day. And you can define that data and make it even more complicated if you want. So here's an example. This is how we usually have this is a system emitter. And it's just a stack of attributes about this particle. This is like a smoke particle. And here we can do stuff like make its color fade out over time so it becomes more transparent. We can scale it up and down. We can define how big it is when it spawns, what color it is when it spawns, how often we want them to spawn. Do we want to spawn just one or spawn several over time? And when you combine a lot of these together, you kind of get a 2D animation that's just a composite of all the different parts. I like to think of and there's 3 layers to particle systems. There is the system, which I like to think of like, imagine you have a fireplace, like a bonfire. That is, the word bonfire is the system, it's the object. The emitter is the fuel you're putting in the bonfire, and then the particles are the smoke that are coming out. So they each have like a relationship to each other, and without the top layer, the bottom layer wouldn't exist. You can't have a bonfire without the fire, right? You can't have a bonfire without the fuel either. So everything kind of works in an order, and then at the end result is the animations you see in the games you like. And then at the end of the day, once you figured out the weird, hard, like why is this not on Google parts of the tools you're using, then it just comes down to your art principles. Principles of form and design, animation principles, color theory. You slap that together, and you try to figure out what looks good based off of it, and also based off the stuff you like. Sometimes it's easier to look at reference first, and then look back at these principles and see like, oh, why does this reference I'm looking at work? And then you realize it's following certain principles really well. So you combine everything together, you come back to your art principles, and then you get VFX. In the industry, typically concept art skills aren't always necessary, but they help to share what you're trying to make. Sometimes just doodles, like on a sketchbook, is enough for people. Depends on the team you're on. How much you need to know how to draw. You don't really need to be like an amazing 2D artist to make these type of textures. You can somewhat make these procedurally or just be really rough with them, because at the end of the day, especially if they're blurry textures, when they kind of meld together, they create an overall image, and you can kind of make good looking stuff without needing to have a super high level of VFX. As long as like the principles are there, like some strong principles like animation, timing, color, you can usually have something that feels good without really having to go over the top with your budget. Yeah, and leadership skills, if you're going to be a lead. Not a whole lot of people know how to give VFX artists feedback. So if you're ever an art director and you have a VFX artist working with you, looking up how to give VFX artists feedback can be very helpful, because we get feedback like, make it more like, make it more like, wow. I was like, thanks, right? Yeah, and especially if you have, and then that's part of the problem solving. You have to figure out what those word mouths mean, which can be fun or it can be mind-boggling. You're like, what does that mean? I think that's the end of the slides, so I'm going to go, that's the end of the slides, so I'll be going to the practical part of it. We're just going to go in and make some VFX. Cool. So this is Unreal Engine 4. I was trying to get 5 running, but apparently my dinosaur needed a graphics update, so we're at 4 right now. I don't know how old 4 is at this point. It's what, like 3 years now? Oh, okay. So in Unreal Engine 4, just overview in case you haven't worked with Unreal in a while or seen it. This is just my content browser. This is where my assets will be stored. This isn't really an Unreal Engine tutorial. This is just me showing kind of like how the process looks like. There's no way I could show all of Unreal Engine in one talk. But a lot of this knowledge actually can transfer over to both Unity and Unreal. But most of the game engines I worked with, even proprietary software, follow kind of the same design of these are the type of things people use. Like you make things change color over time. You make things scale up and down. You need to spawn them a certain way. You need to have a shader. You need to have a texture. You need to have a model. All that fundamental stuff still carries over regardless of the game engine you're in. You just have to figure out where the buttons are in the other engine, essentially, right? Some parts are actually not in the other engines, or they are completely different, and that's what makes certain engines cooler over others for certain projects. But for the most part, most of the fundamental things for VFX are the same. So I'm going to start off with making a particle system. So first, I don't know, let's try a directional burst. Boom. If anybody would like me to make a certain type of asset, I can also make it here live. Like if you want to see a sword swipe, a fireball, I could try to scope creep us and just try to make a simple version of it. If it's too complicated, like if you're asking for like something that takes 3 days, I might just make a doodle. But if you'd like to see anything, a fireball, fireballs. I'll make something rough. So here on the left, we have a view of the particle system. So right now, all it's doing is really just like shooting out a bunch of these fuzzy balls, right? what we're going to want to do is, instead of making it shoot out these sprites, I'm going to do a mesh. So what this is the renderer. We're defining what we want to display. So a lot of the time when you see 2D images in games, there are these things called sprites, and they're essentially just a square that are always facing the camera most of the time. Sometimes we want more specific control, and we don't always want it to face the camera. So when we want a shape like a sphere, we usually try to make it a mesh. So I'm just going to try to borrow something that exists already, hopefully. That is way too big. See, so now if I play them, they're going to like... So this UI is super old now. This looks completely different in what I do at work, but it's relatively the same idea. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting its size. So in the particle system, there's several steps in terms of how things get executed. First, we're going from top to bottom. The emitter gets spawned, and then every frame it'll update something. It'll check for something, right? And then we define here we want it to spawn a particle. So I'm spawning a particle, and what I am defining here is the attribute of its size. So if I make it 0.2, now all the balls are smaller, right? And then here we have a stack of like a bunch of different things it's doing, like it's coloring it over time. Currently, we don't have a material attached to this, so we can't actually do a whole lot. So we're gonna be real quick, step back, and we're gonna make a material. Particle. So if you're wondering how material looks like, typically it's like this node-based and this node-based type UI, and everything feeds into this big one at the right. I'm gonna make this particle translucent, so it's something that can fade out. And then I'm gonna make it unlit because I don't want it to receive lighting from the environment. Most particles you see in video games typically aren't aware of the lighting in the environment. That can be really expensive and not really necessary. And then I'm gonna type in this thing called particle color. So if you notice in here, if I try to set the color of this ball, it's not doing anything, right? That's because it doesn't have a shader attached to it that actually knows what that means. It doesn't know what a color is right now. So what I'm doing is making this particle system, this material, plugging in this is the RGB, which is the color, and then plugging this, which is the transparency, the alpha. And once I make this, I can essentially drag this into my particle system and use it here. And now it should, there you go. It's taking the color input now. So now I can recolor it to whatever color I want. Here we go. Now all these balls are kind of like the same size and the same color. So we're gonna do some wackiness. We're gonna do, one of the principles of art is contrast and making things not all be the same thing. Don't make them the exact same color. Don't make them the exact same size. If you can vary it up a little bit, you'll have a little bit more of an interesting design. Unless your art style for a reason defines you to do things a certain way. You know, there's always a reason. You have to have a reason to do it, and generally this is a good rule of thumb, but you know, art styles can change that. And sometimes you can be in a project that is old, for example, and does things this way, and then you're trying to do it this other way, and even if it does look better overall in general, it looks out of place because it doesn't fit in with the style, because their style looked the other way, right? So over here under the size that I was tweaking, I'm gonna do something called, ooh, please don't crash. I do that every day, but okay. random range float. So this will let me define a range from a minimum to a maximum. And then here, I'm going to have it select from 2 colors. I'm going to have it select from red, and I'm going to have it select from a darker red. And see already, just from having 2 different colors, how much more interesting those balls look. They're also transparent, so they're kind of blending together because I have this module that came together with it. I'll get to the fireball in a sec, sorry. But I have this scale color node, which what it does is that it scales the alpha, which is transparency. So at 0, at the start of the particle's life, it's fully visible. It should be 1. And then at the end of its life, which is 1, the normalized age it's called, it'll be invisible. So as I play this out, you see how they fade out? Now, right now they are lasting really long, and we want something more punchy, more bursting. Usually that means make things live not very long. So what I like to do is I like to stick between 0.3 and 0.1 seconds. Sometimes that's too much, that's too little, depending on what you're doing. So this looks more like a spray. And now it feels like they're dissolving too quickly. So I'm gonna have it hold its transparency for the start a little bit before it fades out. And what this does is that we want, sometimes opaque shapes stand out more than transparent shapes. And if it's starting to fade out the minute it spawns in, your brain doesn't recognize what's going on. Like too well, you can't grasp the silhouette of the shapes as easily. I'm also just gonna, crank up the particles, because why not, right? Don't do this at work. It can chug your game. But, okay, so right now we're adding these in a cone. This add velocity in a cone. What it does is that it spawns the particles at the center, and then there's this imaginary cone, and then each particle is then shot out from that cone at a random strength. So it's either shot out kind of wimpy-like or shot out really strong. So if I made this maximum like 1,500, you see the higher end is now grown, so now these shoot out way farther. So all we're doing here is these are just spheres. They're very simple shapes, but we're animating them just by adding a few randomness to a few variables, and then having it select them. So yeah, that just shows like the last thing I'll show here is making them, nope, not that. So I'm going to make the balls kind of scale down over their life. So you see here, now this kind of started looking like blood, right? And you can get even crazier. Right now all the balls are kind of like the same size, but if you figured out a way to make, if you figured out a way, like right now we can make them kind of random in size, random non-uniform, but you'll see how it looks. Oh, this is really hard to do with one hand. 0.1, 0.3. So now each ball is kind of randomly selecting a direction. Instead of it being like a perfect sphere, now it's kind of just being random in every axis. So you can see they're no longer balls. They are now like ovals. Anyways, I'm gonna move on from this one. I'm gonna make a different one. We got asked for a fireball, so we're gonna try to do a fireball here live, or at least parts of it. To do a fireball, I like to go into my trusty 3D modeling software, Maya. You can use Blender, you can use Maya, whatever. You can use 3ds Max. And nowadays you can even model inside of Unreal, not in 4, which is the one I'm using. You can use it. You can model inside of Unreal Engine 5. I do it at work sometimes. It's kind of cool, but most of the time I was trained in Maya, so this is what I will be using. So there's several ways to make a fireball. One of them is to kind of like get a sphere, cut out these parts, right? And this could be the front of your fireball. Now, if I go to, this is the UVs. Remember earlier when I was talking about how you can unwrap shapes? I don't have a whole lot of screen space here, but I think if I do this, yeah. You can see how there is, how this checkerboard texture is getting applied to it. Right now, because the edge, like this edge here, is at the bottom, it's kind of getting cut off. So typically we're going to want to, I'm going to grab this, it's called a UV shell. And I'm just going to make it take up the whole space because we don't want to waste this, we don't want to waste all this nice texture space here, right? So now we have this object. Cool. I'm going to rotate it. Also, I don't know how much time we have for this, so okay. It's really hard to do with one hand. Okay. So I've made this fireball, and right now, if I scale it, if I stretch it in this direction, it's going to scale this way, right? Which doesn't have the motion of a fireball. But if I move this pivot point to here, and then I scale it from here instead, it's going to stretch like this. And now if I do like this, imagine a scrolling, there's going to be a scrolling texture on this. This somewhat can resemble the shape of a fireball. So what I'm going to do real quick is just put this at the center of the scene, and I'm going to just export it out of my 3D modeling software. And then once it's out of there, I'm going to import it inside of Unreal Engine. That's not the right one. Where'd it go? Don't install one cloud. It just messes everything up. Or OneDrive. I gotta dig for it. Where are you? Here it is. Cool. That's the Maya scene. So I didn't actually export the asset I needed. I need to export something called an FBX. FBX export. It's just a format that stores data, essentially. You can think of your 3D model as a bunch of points, right? And all it does is stores an ID for each of those points and its position. And at the end of the day, that's what a 3D model is. It's just a bunch of points with positions and data, and then we tell it what to do with that data. So then I'm going to go back to try to import it. Here, I'm just gonna do it this way. Now, boom, it's in our game engine. It's gonna be really tiny most of the time. Usually that's because you want to scale it in the software. So you can either do that in the engine, but it's usually cleaner to go to the 3D modeling software and just scale it up. Now, if you are like a 3D modeler or an environment artist, you want to have the exact measurements for the things. You want everything to be to like scale to real life, right? But we're working with VFX, so we don't have to be that precise. That's where I mean we're like, the modeling requirements aren't that crazy. Now this is still too small, but we'll work with it. So I'm gonna make a new particle system. Simple sprite burst. Fire. Cool. Again, I don't need a sprite for this. And here for this mesh, I'll be feeding it this 3D model we just made. And then I'm going to make it bigger. Sure, I'll make it like 10. 10. Now this is a really tiny screen size, but sometimes that's what we end up having to live with. Thanks. So yeah, we got the mesh over here. I'm going to, before I even make a texture for it, before I even add color to it, I'm just going to do some simple block out of my motion. So all I'm going to be doing is scaling this mesh over its life. So right now it's just shrinking down in every axis. But if I make it stretch, it's pointing in the X. If I make it stretch out instead of getting smaller, so I'm making, instead of shrinking, I'm going to make it get longer like this. Right? I'm going to make it live not as long. Maybe like this. And then instead of spawning one, we're going to do something called a spawn rate. And we're going to be spawning a ton. Oh, maybe not that crazy. Right? Now each of these kind of look the same. So I'm going to add some randomness to it. Always a little randomness can go a long way if you can find a place to put it. It helps things feel more natural, like real life. And then I'm going to make this so I'm just going to vary up the length of it when it spawns, how big they are. I'm going to make the, let's say, this, and then I'm going to make the higher end like this. So that we're getting a little randomness here, a little too much maybe. Okay, cool. I'm gonna apply, right now it just looks like wizardry, like what are you envisioning, right? Like sometimes it kind of all comes together at the end, but it's easier to do it at the beginning. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna trust my trusty old buddy Bloom, and just gonna make it glow right now. So this isn't really like a polished fireball or anything. I'm just laying down like different parts. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make a texture. So I will be, huh? CS what? Yeah, not the light mode though. I do not enjoy it, but I have it for reasons, because I don't have a license. So I'm just gonna make a quick texture. So now we're getting to the texture painting part of things. So this is in Photoshop, and I'm going to use my special drawing tablet over here with a really small hard brush. Now, unfortunately, this version of Photoshop does not have pattern preview, so we'll have to live with it. Well, apparently my drawing tablet isn't working either as things go. So I'm going to draw with my hand. No judge, please. Oh, and the shortcuts are different. Great. So right now, I'm just going to draw. I'm going to get my lasso tool and just do some sort of shapes type of thing like this, right? I'm like literally just eyeballing it. This is every hotkey different in this version? Oh no, okay. So I'm making this type of texture for now. And what I need is for this texture to be able to tile perfectly horizontally. So I'm going to do something called an offset to move it over to the right. This is the, okay, it kind of tiles. It kind of worked out. So I'm going to try that again. I'm going to offset it. Yeah, that kind of worked out. Most of the time, these don't tile super great. So whatever, like this isn't a super polished asset. These things can take time. I don't have a drawing tablet. Let's just say this is my level of drawing, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these, and I'm going to just save as. I'm just going to save it as a. Unreal Engine can take PSD files, fun fact. So I might just save it as a PSD. Fire. So I hope that's saved in the right spot. Here it is. Please be the right version. This version of Unreal Engine does not import PSD files. So we will be saving a Targa. Cool. And now I will be getting this texture file, bringing it in here. Failed to re-import file Niagara system. Huh? Yeah, it's this. I'm trying to. Oh, I have a particle system called Fire. I don't know if that would do it. But let me. You might be right. Let's try it. Because there's like extensions on these. You were right. Right? Okay, so we're gonna need a special shader for this because our current shader doesn't read textures, right? So we're gonna make a special shader that can read a texture. So once again, I'm gonna make this translucent. I'm gonna make this unlit. And then I'm gonna bring, this isn't the most optimal clean way of doing all this. I'm just doing the fast way. We're grabbing this texture, and we're doing something called a multiply. So if we multiply this with, to show you an example, if you get, this is called a 3-vector or 3-flow, it has different names. But think of this like RGB, right? If you multiply this white mask with RGB, it'll give you colors. Right now you don't see anything because it's black, but if I set it to red and let it think, you can see how the colors get laid out like this. It multiplies the white with this color, which then results in the color above. So from what we learned from here, if this is also color data, in theory, we can just do this instead, right? Now it looks white because by default particle color is white, but we'll see the result of this in the game engine. So I'm just going to grab this and multiply it real quick here. Cool. now I can just grab this and put it in our fireball here. And it's transparent. It might be compiling the shaders. Give me a sec. There it is. Cool. So it looks, yeah, it looks kind of derpy. But that's where there's a lot, that's why we're using a tiling texture, because we can repeat it. So if you get a color like this, I'm going to multiply it by, let's say, 3. So now you see how it's repeating more. So these are the UVs, the tiling, the unwrapping part that I talked about earlier. You can actually make that repeat more, and if you do that, it makes the texture repeat more. You see this in video games all the time, where it's just a bunch of tiling textures. You can control how big the scaling is. So now if we go back to the engine, it still looks derpy, but it's getting there, right? Now I know that I need to draw my texture a little differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my drawing software and do a few changes. Like, I'm going to make this take up more of the space, and I'm going to fill this in a little more. I'm just going to save the target again. See, sometimes, depending on the company you're working for, they'll have exporters for you, so you don't have to press 20 buttons to do the same thing 200 times a day, which is really nice. But not everybody has that. So if you can make your own, that's super nice. And I just made a change, and I have to re-export again. And it's a process. You have to get used to re-importing things a lot, typically. But now I can just do this. And now what I'm also going to do, so you can see the front of it's getting filled out a little more with the texture I made, but it still looks relatively the same. So sometimes what we do is rotate things. So right now they're all spawning the same way. What we're going to try to do now is we're going to try to, let me see what it's called in this version. Initial mesh orientation. So we're going to define, so let's see, if I move this around, throughout the same. See, so if I move this around, it rotates around. So now I can randomize that. So you see how each is slightly different, rotation. If we start spawning more of them, it kind of starts looking like a fireball a little bit. Now, it's not very voluminous, and there's tricks we can do to make this feel more voluminous. First of all, I like to stretch them a lot more. It's starting to get there a little bit. Another trick I like to do is I literally copy the same particle system, paste it. So now we have two of them playing on top of each other. And I make this color of one of them. Well, first I make one of them render on top. So I'm going to make this one render on top of the other one. Now, you don't see a difference right now because the colors are the same, but you can see how the orange one and this one are combining. I'm going to make the minimum and maximum of these go down like this. So now it kind of looks like it's inside, right? And I'm going to move it a little bit back in space. And now I'm going to make this one more reddish. I'm going to make this one more white. Or, yep. And so we have a much more, so right now the textures are blooming, which means they are pretty much adding on top of each other and it's blowing out to white. So that can be a little hard to control. So I'm going to try to instead, here, we just made something completely randomly cool, right? This is like, you're just moving around, changing colors, and you can just make something. This looks like a holy dark energy beam. We're going to go with it. No more fire. We are now edgy fireball boys. All right. Yep. And now I'm going to, there is a, what I like to do is there's a technique I call canvassing. Nobody calls it that. I just call it that. I've never heard anybody give it a name, so I'm giving it a name. So in a video game, you have a lot of backgrounds that are a lot of different colors. And if your color is on top of, it can be on, like your particle effects can be on, are usually, at the end of the day, you're seeing a 2D image on a screen, right? When they get composited together, the color contrast can be all over the place. If you're in a level that's really bright, like if there's a sky level versus an underground level, the color contrast is all over the place. So what this technique does is that it forces there to be a color behind the particle so that it can, you kind of get a little extra control of the contrast of everything going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this, and it's really funny because all it is a fuzzy ball. So I'm going to get, all I need is this. I'm going to need something else. I'm going to make a copy of this. Also, don't go in life without saving. Sure. So I'm going to make, so you could paint a texture of a fuzzy ball. The reason why I'm not using this one here is because it is by default additive, which means it's only ever bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a fuzzy ball. So it's not called a ball, it's called a sphere? Or not quite a sphere mask. Gradient. Radial. Here it is. Radial gradient exponential. If I plug it in here, you'll see that's just a ball. This is just a bunch of math. There's no texture here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply it. And then now that I have this, I also need to multiply with the alpha. Otherwise, it won't be transparent, and you just see a black. Cool. We did it. So now I apply this here. Give it a minute to think. And it's there, but it's very faint. If I make it really opaque, you can kind of see it. You can see a lot better. But we don't need it that opaque. So I'm going to make this bigger. And this is a sprite, so it's always facing. I'm going to add a spawn right here. It's a sprite, so it's always going to be facing the camera. I'm going to do like, I'm adding a spawn right here, so this fuzzball is spawning and dying, and I just want to be there forever for now. So I have a spawn rate to make it spawn a bunch of them. And it's spawning too many probably because they are living a long time. So see how it starts looking like pulsing? I'm going to make something like this, and then you'll notice the minute I move it back on top, behind everything here, and then 80, and then I'm going to scale it this way. Like the minute that black texture, okay, maybe let's not make it black because then we can't see the shape we had behind it. Let's make it like brownish or something, right? And let's not make it that opaque. But the minute we added that on top of our fireball, it kind of just started, you can tell what color whatever color was behind it, it didn't matter anymore. The color contrast between it is this now. It's kind of like the idea of an outline when you're drawing. If you outline something, it kind of like divides the background and your object. So in a lot of games, especially like League of Legends and stuff, we use these like background sprites to control the contrast of our colors. Otherwise, things can get crazy. And consistency is better if it can look the same across all your environments. The better it'll look, and the less you risk there being a gameplay issue with like people not noticing certain particles on a certain level, for example. Right? I'm gonna make this the pivot point of it the front of it. So now I'm gonna have to move it back. Zero. 50. No. That's not what I want. Custom alignment. Whatever. I won't overcomplicate it right now. I'm just going to make it. Yeah, this is the kind of wacky stuff that you might have to work with sometimes, where it's like, man, it's not pointing where I want it to go. This is a little too advanced, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do anything. So I'm just pretend that I made it align perfectly the way I needed to. We're seeing it only from this angle right now, right? But yeah, here's basically that's a summary of. I thought it was mine. So now that we have this backdrop color. Let's get a little crazy with it. Let's add some. So we know that. Let's look at color wheel. Unless they changed it. Please don't tell me that. Okay, it's the same. So there are color harmonies. Color harmonies are colors that go well together. Kind of like somewhat scientifically, but like if we see these colors in a certain order together like this, our brain thinks everything is good in the world. More or less, right? If we are not in harmony, our brain thinks we are confused and almost like we're in danger. That's why green and purple make you feel like you're about to get poisoned, because typically that is not a color you will find harmonious. So let's see. This is an app called Adobe Colors. It lets you just move colors around and try out different types of color harmonies. So we have like a yellow. So we're gonna make the leading color yellow here, more or less. And then I'm gonna try out the different schemes. So monochromatic is what we currently are in our particle system, because we are relatively like in the same color range. It's just like yellow and then dark yellow and then black, right? So that's monochromatic. We can try to make it a different thing. So complementary. Okay. So blue is complementary with this yellow-orange color. Let me see if I can even copied. Ooh, okay. I didn't know I could do that. Let's see if this works. Can I just like put this here? Oh, there you go. Now, yeah, the color contrast isn't quite there what I wanted. So now it's up to you to like play around with kind of moving the colors around, the darkness. I'm not sure I'm liking this, so we're going to go back to what it used to be. But I've kind of shown the idea here of drawing a texture, putting it on a mesh, scaling it, making things random. how random you make it can completely change the look of what you're working on. Now at this point, we kind of lost track of the fireball. So sometimes just moving the mouse wheel around, you can just get stuff you like. Okay, cool. Does anybody want me to make any other type of asset? Cool. Now, anybody have any questions about anything?
Oh, ooh. I can be heard. So on your slides, you had the slashing animation, or the slashing effect with the
This?
torus and the...
Yep.
I was just curious if you could talk through the process of making those sort of blurry frame animation. Is that something that you do a simulation for, or is it all just like test the frame, go back, paint
Making
more?
this type of slash?
Mhm.
So the slash animations, there's something we have called a dissolve, which I can kind of show you here. Dissolves essentially is like an additional texture we are using to say this is how we want things to fade away. So I'm going to do a really rough one here. But if I start previewing this node here, if I start previewing node, okay, and then I get a texture sample, and then I'm going to make this like some random texture, like noise. Like this. And we do this. You see how it's like becoming, it's like dark? This black would be, at the end of the day, would be transparent. See? So where that texture was black, it becomes more transparent. Now, if my texture was curated a certain way, the more powerful those are, if I make this like 8, so they're the opposite. I want to do this. It's like slowly fading it away more. This is a terrible example, actually. But what we do is that we first draw the main shape. You draw the sword swipe, exactly how you see it here. In this person, they drew each frame of the sword swipe. What sometimes people do is they draw the main sword swipe, and then they draw a texture. And this one texture is called a dissolve texture, which tells you how this main shape is dissolving out. So the thing with dissolves is that you have the silhouette of something, and the dissolve eats away at the same silhouette. But if you wanted the silhouette to move, the dissolve wouldn't work anymore. So what we do is that, at least on my team, we use 2D animations for a lot of things. That is much harder to come across people who can like animate things. Most VFX artists you'll find actually use procedural techniques like the dissolve I told you about. But it really depends on the person. What was the main question again? Just to make sure I answer it.
Yeah, I was specifically curious about like how you chose those sort of blobs in the texture for the animation. Is that just practice of drawing those sort of blobs?
Yeah, so part of it is practice of like drawing a shape. It's a 2D object. You have no idea how this is going to get displayed on this model. Part of it is iteration, where you draw it, you put it on the model, you see how it looks. And if it doesn't look good, you can kind of tell that if I drew a line here and I filled up this part of the color, it will like kind of look better on the model. You might think like, oh, there's too much of a gap here. You fill in the gap in the texture in 2D. You see on the 3D model, and then it looks better. So yeah, it's like an acquired skill. And then after you do it for a while, you can kind of tell what kind of shapes at what size will end up looking semi-okay, at least for a start, and then work from there. But as you can see, like this isn't really a complicated texture. Like, all you would need to do is like, I'm gonna do this with my hand. Just like like this, right? Now, depending on your art style, this who knows how this will look like on. This just looks like whatever right now. But what's fun about VFX is that you have blur. Blur is your best friend. What blur lets you do is make things look cool, even if your shapes weren't cool at first. Right? So this like quick texture I drew, this could be something, right? Now I have something. There's something called a gradient. There's like a technique called gradient mapping, where just apply it only to this. Is it working? Reverse. Cool. What this is doing is it's getting the white part of the texture and interpolating between the white part of the texture and the black part of the texture. So I'm gonna make this red, and I'm gonna make this like yellow. And now, hopefully, if I do this, it'll look a little better. You're right. It's right now it's purely white, so it's only gonna color one color. But if I turn off this mask, you see how it's going from the black where it was black, it's red, and now it's going here. I can try. Let's just see it real quick in the game engine. I'm just gonna override this. I don't care. It's just faster. I have no clue how this is gonna look. It might not work. Yeah, there goes my fireball, right? So I'm just gonna do this. Remove the subtraction part. Remove everything, to be honest. Multiplying that. Let's do this instead. There we go. So now we see the color data we had. And now we're going to try to get this. So if I look in this texture, it has a red channel, green channel, blue channel, and an alpha channel. Right now, the red channel is just flooded white for whatever reason. Okay. So I'm just going to grab this green instead. So now it kind of isolated the white part of the shape more or less. This is not the most ideal way of doing it, but I'm just doing it for an example. We kind of created a shape, and we can bring it in. And now what I would do is I would like do this dissolve we did, and then like sometimes you can dissolve it with itself, which sounds weird, but if I do this, sometimes you can blend shapes with themselves and just move them over slightly, and then as you're moving them, increase the amount of subtraction, or if you're doing like a smooth step erosion or something else more advanced, just multiply things with themselves. If you go to GDC Vault, there's a talk by the Diablo team about how they made their smokes, and this is like Diablo 2, I think, not Diablo 3. And what they do is they have like, I can make, these type of textures are actually not too hard to make, so I can make this one live. There's this cool, this is every VFX artist's best friend, the clouds filter, right? So what I do is I get this cloud filter, and then I get like a nice little soft brush, and then I just draw, yeah, and I draw this blob, right? And then, I don't know, I'm just gonna like, I don't even remember what the blur I had on this was. I'm just gonna blur it anyways. Cool. If I do this, and then set this as a multiply, boom, I made kind of random, quirky smoke, right? And then what happens? You can do a ton of stuff to the cloud filter. If you blur it out, it kind of looks like this. And this is good for more stylized stuff, right? I also like to do something called I learned this purely through experimentation. If you do this maximum stuff, it creates this kind of shape, which is interesting. If you do minimum, it does like this, which is more like caustic-y almost, right? So you can get some cool water textures from this. So depending on, you can really make your whole game based off this clouds filter I just showed you. Like, I've seen games just made from just noise, and then you process it somehow and it creates something. If your art style allows it, go for it. It's really fast. I did this cloud texture really quickly. Now, if I were to, I'm going to group these together, and I'll make a copy of this. I'm going to like just set this other to multiply it, this other group to multiply, and then I'm just going to rotate it. Unless this version of, is there nothing in my group? Absolutely not. Okay, cool. I'm just going to do that again. Don't mind me. Duplicate. Cool. Now we have two of them. I'm going to multiply. I'm going to rotate it. See how it's like blending differently? And then there's something called a levels filter, because right now it's really dark. So I'm going to put this at the end. I'm going to like brighten things up. At least I should be brightening things up. It's in a group. There you go. More or less. Here you go. Cool. So now, if you can envision how Diablo does it, I like to show things in Photoshop because it's essentially the same thing. That's why I said that the math I'm doing in the shader, it's actually just Photoshop blend modes. I'm not actually doing math. I am an art major. So what I can show now, if it lets me, is if I rotate this, you can see how things are blending together, right? And then I can like move it up and down, and it's creating like a motion to it. So Diablo does this a lot, and you can, and it kind of creates this fake idea of motion. You can do this with water too. And if you want to be, if you're like, I don't like how this one looks, you can just make another clouds. And now I have like a blurry cloud combined with a not blurry cloud. How will that look, right? You can create a lot of like interesting shapes. And then if I spawn a bunch of these, rotate them differently, you can kind of create like an explosion if you wanted to, or smoke, dust. It all depends on how you colored them, right? Remember that gradient map I showed earlier? You can like do it after this too. And then cool. Like if you can get some cool shapes from this. Anyways, I went a little bit over, but any questions? Sorry.
Hi. So first of all, excellent talk. I've been interested in trying to figure out VFX for a long time as a non-artist. So this was exactly the kind of overview that I've looked for and have not really found. So really hit my sweet spot.
Thanks.
Now, for the game that I'm working on, it's a 2D pixel art game. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts about designing effects in 2D? Are there things that I would need to think about that wouldn't necessarily apply from a 3D perspective, or vice versa?
So you can still use sprites that are just camera-facing like squares to do the effects you need. All that is changing is how you are drawing your textures. A lot of the fundamentals are still the same. For your pixel art game, you can either hand animate your VFX and you might have to for some things. For like sword swipes, that's going to be the way that we do it for regular video games. I believe for pixel art, you want the pixels to always be like parallel to the screens, right? That's going to be a little harder to execute on. But for other things like an explosion, I've actually worked on a, let me see. I like going to game jams. I've been to like 20 at this point. And one of the, let me see, itch.io. One of the games I made, you can, oh, it's right here. I'm logged in. Cool. It's called Husk, and it's not pixel art. It's 3D, but we're like, haha, Minecraft, everything's blocky. So we made all I made all of VFX just like cubes, essentially, right? Everything in this game was cubes. I was like, why would I make a round object in this square world? So, and same as Minecraft, they have explosions there too, and they're just squares. So what you could do if you wanted to try it was just have square textures, and then just spawn a bunch of them, and have them shoot out a certain way. Vary up the color. The color for pixel art is like the most important thing, I feel like, apart from like the motion. Make like square particles. You can make them like cube meshes if you want to be there some dimensionality to it, or you can make it just squares. Yeah, vary up the colors, the sizes, spawn them a certain way. And then sometimes you're going to need to draw it for pixel art. That's at the end of the day, you just have to like, just going to have to draw it because the art style specifically demands the pixels to be like parallel like that. That can make things tougher unless you know how to create a filter to like kind of break down the texture. That can get really tricky with particle systems, but it is possible to like make something that isn't that isn't square, and then feed it through some sort of processing and then have it come out square anyways. That can be really tricky, but potentially possible. Anything's really possible if your brain can somehow figure it out. Because in a game engine, you have full control of like every piece of data you have in the scene. Like the game engine exposes to you a lot of data. It exposes you color data, exposes to you geometry, it exposes to you reflections, directions. Remember how I told you a 3D model is like just a bunch of points with data? If you can grab that data and then tell it to do something with it, or force it to do something with it, you can pretty much like achieve anything in a game engine. And so the more you get used, that's why I really love shaders, because they are literally like the paintbrush. If you got the right paintbrush, you can do the thing you need really easily. Like if you got a soft brush and you're trying to make like pixel art, good luck, right? It's gonna be really hard unless you somehow make that like soft brush square some way. But if you're able to make your own paintbrush with your own shaders to make this pixel art look for certain things, cool. But at the end of the day, my experience sometimes is just easier to draw it, unfortunately. So unless you're gonna know you're gonna be using this in a lot of places, try to not make too much like tech for one thing, right? If you know you're gonna spend like days on this figuring it out, and drawing it, and it doesn't need to look that amazing, don't spend too much time on it, especially especially if you're an indie dev, like every day costs you money. You want to budget your time, so try to budget your time by biting the bullet and just drawing it. even if you don't have a drawing background. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, can you show us a little bit of your work?
Yeah, I can show you. So I'll show you. This is not the most recent, but this is the second most recent, so it's good enough. Let me get a little more pixels, please. It says it's 1080. That is a lie. That is a lie. Unless I have like crazy. This is YouTube bitrate. Yeah, I'm gonna try opening it up here. Oh, that's much better. You can tell my recommendations here. Noob versus pro artist. I've been watching a lot of those. Please full screen. Okay. So this is Darius. I'm working on a fighting game right now. I do a lot of sword swipes for them. The main thing I did on these are like the sword swipes actually, and some dust, and anything that's coming out of him basically is. Yeah, we have a team, so the hit sparks were made by our principal artist, so he's pretty cool. So this is like most of the things for the character himself I made, but like parts of it was made by different parts of the team. And you get to work with like animators to design those kind of like cinematic moments and stuff. Yeah. Very different art stuff from what I was working on before. So I can show you, before I joined the team, I can show you a little bit of my progress. I have my old reels. So this is before I joined the company I'm on. Wait, this is the wrong thing. This is me out of college. This is me out of college. I spent 2 years in college kind of like self-studying VFX because there's no real way to do it other than just self-studying. I was in the games major, so I got a chance to make games while I was there. I kind of made a fireball there, if you see. It was like a phoenix fireball type of thing. So this is. Here I'm just using like a bunch of color theory and stuff. This is like really early production of our senior capstone game. I was making all types of VFX. Too many, some might say. This was for an art test for a company. I don't know if I could say who it was. I did not get there. I did not get the job, unfortunately. It worked out. Yeah, and then I can show you the most recent stuff the stuff before the thing I just showed you, my work on League of Legends. Oh, there's music. So this is the art test I did for the fighting game. So I kind of tailored this portfolio to the team I'm on right now because I wanted to be on the fighting game. So I made like the shader from Guilty Gear, that kind of like 2-in style shader. I was like really into faking 2D and 3D stuff. So here I have a double ice mirror, which is usually not something you do very easily in 3D without having a custom rig. This isn't a rig. This is me drawing it. So it's that type of like, sometimes you just have to brute force it so you don't have to make a rig. This is actual League of Legends. This is the last thing I did before I left the team. This is Imperial Cassante. A lot of colors here, really hard to balance, you can imagine, right? But at this point, I had been on a lot of different characters, and I had already actually worked with the rainbow previously as a color scheme, so I kind of felt ready for it. And all the stuff I'm showing you, like layering stuff together like that, all the stuff I showed you, it all kind of compiles together to the stuff you see here. And for my programmer homies out there, when I started college, I was a programmer only. I learned how to draw while I was in college. So anybody can do it. You don't have to, and like here, none of these particular drawings are too complicated or really high level. You can learn a few techniques that really work well for you and still make really cool art for your games. A lot of it's just blurry textures. Yeah, no problem. Sorry, any more questions? I know I'm going long. I always do.
So just thinking about the non-photorealistic rendering stuff, and specifically Guilty Gear, which I'm a big fan of. I bought the game for the art style, even though I can't play it. But I remember hearing about how they did that. There's a lot of like frame rate stuff going on, especially for the 3D models, where like they would, it wouldn't be a smooth animation to be like, fake 14 frames per second or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you do that in your VFX?
So I have to follow the lead of what the animations are. And if the animations are doing that, it's a good idea to do it myself. In our game, we do have somewhat the same idea of limited animations where we just try to focus on key poses, but a little less so than Guilty Gear. So we actually end up having more frames than Guilty Gear sometimes, which is not always a good thing. Because sometimes holding a key pose can be stronger than like interpolating a pose. So sometimes that we do like, at work I have a limited amount of frames. Our textures are huge. I have a limited amount of frames I have to work with. I don't want to make big textures, so I select the frames and how many drawings I'm going to make, and in a way that creates that type of limited style of animation. Yeah. Also, yeah, Guilty Gear is awesome. I got like 500 hours in it. They actually are like really good at VFX. Sorry. Was there somebody else who had their, or did you have another?
Well, I guess maybe like how do you do the limited animation? So like if do you just have like a sprite sheet and you just like in the particle system in Unreal, like do you like say, hey, play these 6 frames over this speed, or like how do you do that? Because like everything so far has been like interpolated, right?
Yeah. So I'm hand drawing each frame, essentially, and that depends on the project you're. Some projects just do hand draw in 2D frames. Some just interpolate. The current one I'm on, we do a lot of like draw every frame where we need it, and that's kind of how it ends up looking. Yeah. So yes, no interpolation, just brute force drawing on this project. Yes.
Hi. Something I was thinking about during your talk is it seems like VFX artists, for the kind of work you're describing, it seems like your work kind of indirectly touches what a lot of other different people do. Like, a particle effect is attached to an attack, and it's attached to part of a model, and it ties into the broader art style of this and that. It seems like basically you have to be effectively cooperating with a bunch of different other people, and your work is kind of connected to what they will do or have already done. So I'm kind of curious, like, how does it work out for you guys in that discipline when you have to make your VFX work with the different animations that are coming through, the different character models that are coming through, and that might be changing during development? I feel like you might have some interesting stories there.
Yeah, so you're right. We pretty much like interact with everybody. Sometimes we interact with the 3D character modeling team too. So I guess I'll go down by different disciplines. Programmers, first of all, we need to spawn our particles somehow. Some of us don't know code, some of us do. Different projects have different tools. Sometimes we have tools that just let us say we need to spawn a particle here really easily, and so we don't need a programmer. Sometimes it's a little more complicated than that, and we do actually need to make like a ticket to spawn tell a programmer, please spawn this at this exact time. I don't know how to look for in this component for when this thing triggers. So with programmers, we end up having to, depending on the person, like I know blueprints in Unreal, so I actually end up doing a lot of my own code for spawning VFX, and that is seen as okay on the team. Sometimes people want the programmers to do everything, and that's fine. It just depends on the team. So that's programmers. Animation depends on your project. Sometimes your VFX don't even need to match the animation that much. If you're like a top-down, like League of Legends, you can somewhat match the animations. Like depends if it's like a sword swipe. Yeah, you need to make a sword swipe. But if it's like a fireball, your character, there's like a character in League that just does this, right? They just like push forward. You have some open space to like to do whatever you want there. You can design shapes however you want. Sometimes you have to, like on the project I'm on, you're working with an animator. You have to really, what they're making really affects what you're doing a lot. So it really depends on the project. I end up having to communicate a lot with animators, telling them like, hey, this sword swipe looks really weird if we have this animation, or the hitboxes, it feels wrong. So we end up having to Sorry, my voice has been slowly going out. We end up having to like make tweaks in the animation so that sword swipe looks a little better. Sometimes there's that back and forth. Sometimes we have a really cool idea, like animation has no idea what they're gonna do here, and we're like, VFX artist comes up and he shows them like a doodle of an explosion, and they're like, let's do it, right? So then once in a while, the VFX artist gets his moment in the sun and gets to be the first step of like, what is this animation gonna be? It can start in a lot of different steps. Sometimes cinematic stuff starts off more with concepts and purely animation. So it really depends per team for animation, for animators. Some people just get their animations and they're like, okay, I'll just make something for it, even if it's really tough. So some people are more communicative with their team than others. We have to interact with game designers a lot because our visual effects need to, one of the most important thing is clarity for gameplay. So with game designers, we have to make sure, like on League of Legends, is it showing the radius of the explosion correctly so players don't get hit accidentally, like be like, huh, why did I get hit there, right? So we have to, sometimes game designers are like, here's this huge hitbox. And I'm like, you know how hard that is to make? Can we make it smaller or simpler, right? So sometimes there can be that back and forth to save a little time for everybody. Because sometimes people make really crazy stuff that they don't realize how hard it would actually be to make that. So there's a lot of different fun back and forths with game designers to make sure the gameplay reads clear. What else am I missing? Character artists, sometimes we have like cool shaders on a character that we need to like make the character look like there's a moon inside of them or stars, right? And that VFX artists know how to make shaders relatively. Some do, some don't. So if you do have one that knows how to make shaders, they're cool. They're a cool person to reach out to if you're a character artist to like get cool star or VFX in your character model. And in terms of like technical artists and rigging artists, we are dependent on the bones they give us to spawn particles. So sometimes we talk with them and be like, hey, can I get a bone here, please? So like fetch me a bone, literally, like throw me a bone. Yeah, throw me a bone so I can spawn my particle on it, please. Thank you. Sometimes animators have to animate an invisible bone because our VFX gets spawned to it. That's kind of goofy, but it's fun. Yeah, I hope that answered that question. Cool.
Alrighty, I think we will go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you again, Jose, so much.
Yeah.
Give him a round of applause. Thank you for showing us your process, your work, both past and present. Yeah, and feel free to reach out and ask more questions. If you didn't get to ask your question, Jose is in the Discord. Yeah. And we'll be winding down now and making our way out towards a place to get food and drink, probably Applebee's.